Mutually assured destruction. Mutually assured destruction, also known as MAD, is a doctrine of military strategy in which the use of high-yield weapons of mass destruction by two opposing sides would effectively result in the complete and irrevocable annihilation of both the attacker and the defender. In other words, if one country attacks, both will die. The name of mutually assured destruction and the acronym MAD were thought up by John von Neumann, a Hungarian-American mathematician who died in 1957. In August 1945, Japan surrendered to the United States of America after the dropping of nuclear bombs on both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 4 years later, on the 29th of August in 1949, the USSR detonated its own nuclear explosive. At this time, however, neither of the countries had the technology to effectively use the nuclear bombs against each other, so these detonations were only used to cause tension between the two countries. Further into the Cold War, the development of bomb-carrying aircrafts like the USA's Convair B-36 enabled the ability to deploy nuclear weapons into the opposing country. The Convair B-36 was the largest mass-produced piston-engine aircraft ever made. It had the longest wingspan of any combat aircraft ever at 70.1 meters. Ironically, it was nicknamed the Peacemaker. The Cuban Missile Crisis gave the Soviet Union a much greater understanding of the U.S. ballistic missile submarine forces, giving the Soviets a boost to their own development of ballistic missile submarines. This kept the threat of an ocean-based attack strike in check. In the 1980s, USA was rumored to have a doomsday device, a technology that would literally end the entire world. It was activated through control, therefore keeping its threat at relatively the same level as nuclear bombs. Responding to this rumor, the Soviets built a machine they named the Dead Hand, a self-activated nuclear warhead that would be activated if any threats of ICBMs were detected nearing the USSR. This device was considered to be one of the biggest threats of the Cold War, and it is still not known if it is armed. The United States Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stated that nuclear nations can either have first, second, or both strike capabilities. Countries with first strike capability can simply attack without warning, meaning most countries have first strike capabilities. To prevent these attacks from happening, countries would have a fixed number of planes in the air at all times, allowing them to shoot down any possible threats whenever needed. This tactic gave these countries second strike capabilities. Second strike capability occurs when a nation has the ability to respond to an attack, which is what mutually assured destruction is based upon. MIRVs, a multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle. This weapon was created by the United States to help aid in their first strike capabilities. With a MIRV payload, an intercontinental ballistic missile could hold many separate warheads. This means that one ICBM could release many bombs with one launch, making defense against them very difficult. Since each defensive missile could only counter one offensive missile, MIRVs caused the cost of defense to greatly rise, for the Soviets would need many defensive missiles to remove the threat of one MIRV payload. The USA's MAD doctrine was modified on July 25, 1980, because President Jimmy Carter adopted countervailing strategy, which planned to kill the Soviet leaders instead of bombing their countries and population. This would hopefully lead to a surrender from the USSR instead of its destruction along with the USA's. This policy was developed further with the Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as SDI, which was also nicknamed Star Wars. The goal is to develop space-based technology to remove Soviet missiles before reaching the United States. SDI was criticized by both enemies and allies of the USA. The point of mutually assured destruction was to make sure no one attacked anyone because there would be no winner. If this idea of SDI was implemented and succeeded, there would be no assured destruction from the Soviet attacks. The critics further argued that it could start a new arms race, this time to develop a defense from SDI. The fall of the Soviet Union led to the sovereignty of the Russian Federation. This caused tensions between this new power and the United States to be much lower. America's tension with China was also decreased. However, in 2002, President George W. Bush withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, an action that Russia took as a threat to their nation's well-being. Relations have recently improved between the United States and Russia, and international nuclear warfare is highly unlikely. However, the decay in Russia's nuclear capabilities may negatively affect them should the USA decide to initiate a nuclear war. An article by Keir Lieber and Daryl Press stated that the United States could carry out a nuclear first strike on Russia and would have a good chance of destroying every Russian bomber, base, submarine, and ICBM. As with most theories and viewpoints, there are many critics who disagree. Many experts say that neither of the countries are safe when dealing with the issue of nuclear war.